Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We will wait a couple of minutes for people to join in. And in the meantime, maybe you can just start writing who you are, where you're from, where you're based, so we have a little bit of an idea of who is here. Nice to see you popping in. Oh, great turnout. It will be an interesting conversation today. Hope you have already a few questions that you want to ask. Keep them safe, and yeah, it'll be great to hear later from you as well. All right. There might be a couple more that will just jump on, but that's all good. Tēnā koutou katoa, tuarua ki ngā ngate, haere atura. Kia tātou e tōne, kia ora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I want to warm welcome you all to this webinar. I am based in Aotearoa, New Zealand, hence my introduction in Te Reo Māori. I was acknowledging the people who passed away and the people present here, and yeah, wishing you all warm welcome to this webinar. We will be recording this session, or you maybe already noticed that that the recording button is going, and we will share this as well as some of the resources that we shared today with you afterwards. So no need to take notes. It will all be sent to you later. Today, I've got two co-presenters with me. Both are very experienced fundraisers, and both have worked with Raisely for a number of years. So yeah, let me start with introducing our two fabulous speakers. So first of all, I would like to introduce you to Alice. Alice first started with Fareshare as a volunteer 5 years ago, and now works across all fundraising, including coordinating appeals, campaigns, and developing proposals for support. Alice, not everyone is familiar with Fareshare. Can you tell me a little bit about what your organization does?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So at Fareshare, we focus on cooking free, nutritious meals for people who need food assistance. We rescue food from supermarkets and food businesses and grow our own vegetables as well, which our chefs and volunteers cook into thousands of meals a day. We have kitchens in Melbourne and Brisbane that distribute our meals throughout Victoria and Queensland, South Australia, and New South Wales as well. Our focus is on making those meals as nutritious as possible, so we can provide a bit of relief to people who need our support and improve their well-being as well.
Excellent. That's amazing. So dual purpose, environmental and social impact as well. So that's amazing. You will be sharing a little bit about your Fareshare Footsteps Challenge today. So maybe you can give me some just really key facts about your campaign, and in the meantime, I'll bring it up briefly, your campaign as well. So you can people can have a look at it while you chat.
So we launched the Fareshare Footsteps Challenge in 2020 during lockdown. I think, like many people, we really wanted to engage with our community during lockdown, and we did that through this event. So it's a virtual fitness fundraiser, which goes over 15 days. And the idea is to walk 25, 50, 100 or 150 kilometers over those 15 days and raise money to support Fareshare. This was the page you can see here was for our event last year, which was our second event. So we engaged just over 700 participants and raised just over 330,000
Great, that's an awesome result. Well, we will hear way more about that in a minute, but thank you so much for giving that context. I also want to introduce you to Jenny. Jenny works for UNICEF and has been working in the not-for-profit sector for 5+ years, both in Australia and the UK. Her expertise sits across active event management, donor stewardship, and digital recruitment as well. Um, I think a lot of people have an idea about what UNICEF does, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But you will be sharing a little bit about water walks. And yeah, it would be really good to get some key stats about water walks as well. You don't have to go into much detail because we will do that later anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Helga. So Water Walk is our community fundraising kind of signature event. Yeah, we'll go into a lot more detail, but it's really connecting people in Australia to what so many people around the world do with having to walk hours each day to access water. And the challenge is actually kicking off next week. So one more week of recruitment before we officially activate. But yeah, second year running.
Excellent, exciting. Thanks so much. I look forward to hearing more about that as well. And then finally, me. I'm Raisley's Customer Success Manager based in Aotearoa, New Zealand, as I mentioned. And I've worked across both volunteering and fundraising for quite a number of years. I won't say how many. For me, the peer-to-peer world, I really love it because it brings together volunteering and fundraising, because really your fundraisers are your volunteers, because they go out really hard and go out of the way to fundraise for your organization. So I really love that those concepts of volunteer management and recruitment and engagement are actually quite applicable to your fundraisers as well. So that's why I'm pretty passionate about this particular topic. So the plan for today. We will first spend a few minutes on talking through some concepts, benchmarks, key insights, etc. Some of that is actually covered in Tom's webinar last month, what was. So it's kind of a really brief recap of those insights. And then we will focus most of our time on a framework, and we will hear from Alice and Jenny mostly how they went about to setting up strategies for their campaigns. And we finish off with some time for a Q&A. In your toolbar at the bottom of your screen, you will be able to see a Q&A box. So please pop your questions in that Q&A one, not in the chats, because it really is easy to get lost in the chat flow. So if you put your questions in the Q&A, you can do that throughout the webinar, and then at the end, some of those questions may already be answered by some of my colleagues, but others we will kind of touch on later at the end as well. So yeah, we have 10 minutes at the end for that. So that's the plan. So let's start cracking. So peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer campaigns are, of course, fundraising campaigns. And that's where you mobilize your supporters to fundraise in support of your organization. The beauty of it is that they will tap into their own networks and therefore expanding your reach. So you might have like a number of supporters, and they each have a number of people they tap into as well. So, you know, it's a multiplying effect. We do have a whole range of peer-to-peer campaigns. Obviously, you have your DIY fundraising campaigns where people at their own bed start an idea. They may organize a garage sale or a head shave or a bake sale or anything they want to do in support of your organization. That's a peer-to-peer concept. And then you have the campaigns that you as the charity take initiative to organize. And these can, of course, have multiple forms. You can have physical, virtual, hybrid. They can have an active component, but not necessarily have to. So there's a whole range of different types of execution of peer-to-peer campaigns. But the main concept with all of those are that you go out to your supporters and the supporters go out to their donors. And there are some really good reasons to run peer-to-peer campaigns. First of all, it turns out that the people donating are more generous. So for them, they're not necessarily donating to your organization, but they are donating to the person they know. And in that context, they are tend to be a bit more generous. So that's something that will work in your benefit, of course. And I mentioned it a few times already as well. Another reason is that you can expand your supporter space. And especially when you work in that context of, an online platform where you can capture the donor information, that may offer you some opportunities to reach out to these people afterwards. Of course, you need to keep in mind your privacy policies around that, but there's an opportunity to start extending in that context as well. So just some of the insights that Tom shared last month. I will really kind of glance over it. If you want to know more about it, I really would recommend that you either look again at the webinar if you were there, or just flick us an email if you want to put your hands on that webinar, because Tom does some really good deep diving into the data, and that can help you with setting up your campaigns. It's not just about peer-to-peer, but also appeals. But of course, I'll just focus on peer-to-peer here. $50 is the magic number for your donation form. A whopping 80% of all donations to peer-to-peer campaigns are of $50. Then $20 comes next, with 11% choosing that amount, and $100 after that. And another 10% of your donors choose that amount. So those kind of figures are really good to know when you are designing your donation form, and kind of helping your supporters creating an ask to their donors. Another really good interesting insight is around the velocity of your campaign. The graphs that you can see in the screen shows two things. The first one is the sign up, so how quickly you get your supporters signing up for your event. And the second graph is around how long it then takes for them to create their donations and reach your campaign target. And it turns out, on average, obviously every campaign is slightly different, but on average it takes about a month to recruit all your supporters for your campaign. So you just need to be really mindful when you launch your campaign, and when you're actually ask them to do something, that you allow enough time to recruit your maximum amount of fundraisers. And then you also need to allow some time for them to actually go out and raise funds. So some will go in straight ahead. Others will take a little bit longer to get themselves going. So that is really important as well for how long you want to have your campaign running. But also leave it open, that sometimes after an event, donations will still drip through, and you will find your velocity of your campaign, and you can compare them year after year and fine tune that. And that helps you informing marketing and all those kind of things as well. So we thought it was quite handy to share with you. Some other interesting facts. Here are the activation benchmark and the total amount raised by your fundraiser benchmarks for 2021. We see across all the campaigns that run on the Raisely platform that 55% of the people who sign up actually go out and be active. And when we say active, is raising at least $1. Obviously, some of those donate to themselves. So if they just do a self-donation, we mark them as activated. So if we exclude that self-donation, it turns out that 36% of your fundraisers actually go out and gather donations from their networks. So those benchmarks are really good for you to keep an eye on when you are keeping an eye on first of all, setting your goals, and then of course, tracking how your campaign is performing. And similar for your total amount raised, it turns out that on average, an individual raises $381, and a team would raise $1,624. Again, these are of course averages, but good to have in mind. It's also interesting to know that not all your fundraisers are equal. So even though 36 raise money, it's only the top 10% that really go hard out. And they actually raise 65% of your funds. And the top 5% of your fundraisers raise 52% of your funds. So important to really nurture your top fundraisers, but also to keep an eye on the ones that are not necessarily showing that same kind of outcome. What can you do to help them to improve their track record, so to speak? And then one more thing I want to share with you before we start chatting with Alice and Jenny. There are a lot of factors that influences. Well, basically, no. Let me put it differently. We looked at fundraisers and looked at what characteristics they have. And it turns out that fundraisers that share their profile, add a photo, are a member of a team, etc., turn out to be more effective fundraisers. So we don't know if it's a cause and what is a cause and effect, but it's definitely a correlation. So the more things they do in their profile, the more likely it is that they go on with activating their profile, i.e. raising money. And the second part of that slide that you can see is if they also add a description and some other things, it turns out that they become more effective fundraisers. So again, it's not a cause and effect, but we do know that people who are effective fundraisers have these things in common. So that is also very interesting for you to keep in mind when you design your program. So this is all very interesting, but how do you actually get from I want to do something with a peer-to-peer to executing a very successful campaign? We have developed a framework, so let's head over there and we will talk you through that whole framework and hear from Jenny and Alice how they went about that. Apologies, I sometimes have to look away from the screen to point out to the main screen. So bear with me if I look away from the camera, but it's not about me anyway. So just focus on what you see in the main screen. Anyway, we have a framework here, and it's all very well that we have a platform like Raisely where you can create really quickly a campaign. But before you do that, there's probably a lot of thinking that goes on. And to help you with that thinking, we have developed this framework and we created it in Miro, which is a tool we use a lot in Raisely. It's quite cool for whiteboarding in a remote team, either in a sync or async setting. So we thought we share you not only the framework, but also some of the tools that we use, a little bit of an insight into Raisely, I suppose. So this board is made up of basically 5 different tiles. The first one is a little bit instructions on how to use Miro, especially if you haven't used it before, how you can duplicate it and create your own Miro board as well that you can then start using. And then we have 4 phases, and we will now go through each of those phases and touch on a little bit more detail around that. So first phase is the brainstorming phase. That's all about developing the concept of your campaign. And a strong concept will help you mobilizing your supporters and help you tell your story. So first we suggest you explore your motivation. So I'm really keen to hear, what was the reason for running your campaign? Alice, maybe you can make a start with that.
So as I mentioned earlier, we were looking for a way to engage with supporters during lockdowns. So we introduced it as a way to connect with our community. So that's mostly our volunteers. We have quite a big team of volunteers in Melbourne and in Brisbane, as well as our corporate volunteers, so groups that come in with organisations to volunteer in our kitchens as well. We also use the challenge to highlight the wonderful work our chefs do cooking meals for people who need food assistance.
Excellent, thank you so much. And what about you, Jenny? Was there a particular trigger for your organisation to run a campaign?
Yeah, I think like most people looking when they're kind of dipping their toe in the last few years, COVID was probably the key trigger. We saw, so many of events that we usually participate, the runs that happen around the country all getting cancelled, that we decided it was an opportunity to try something new. And when we launched Water Walk in 2020, we very much considered it as a pilot. And we're like, let's just see how it goes. Let's not put any, huge KPIs. And then we were really heartwarmed with the response, and that people did want to support it, and have now kind of been able to evolve it into something that we want to run annually.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So in both situations, there was a bit of a trigger that made you start this particular campaign. Secondly, it's always very important to just kind of pause and zoom basically back to your organization. And it sounds a bit weird because you're very much familiar with the mission of your organization. But for your campaign, it's quite important to identify, are you actually going to approach this as a whole of organization campaign, or are you zooming in on one particular project or aspect of your work? So Jenny, what was it for you guys?
Yeah, we decided, in dipping our toe in, we wanted to make sure that it connected to our work. We didn't want to do just a general fundraise for UNICEF. We wanted to make it something a little bit more tangible and a little bit more where there was a clear impact. So we landed on the Water Walk, which is asking people to walk 7 Ks a day for 7 days, so that it aligns with women and children who have to walk hours each day to collect water. In 2020, we kind of kept it at that level. And then for this year, we've decided to make it even more specific, and looking at children in crisis who have those added difficulties of damaged infrastructure, unsafe terrain. I think the stat that more children die from unsafe water than direct violence in conflict areas really brought in that, hey, this is actually something that we should tell our supporters about and that people are going to connect with. So for us, it was really important to have that tangible link between the activity that we're asking people to do and the impact that it's having on children.
Yeah, that's a great example, and that then helps you, of course, telling the story and mobilizing your audiences around that. Yeah, great to hear. So once you've kind of identified that, you probably then want to talk about your audiences. Alice, you already mentioned that you really specifically wanted to connect with your supporters and your volunteer program. Has that pivoted a little bit over time? Can you tell me a bit more about your audiences that you targeted?
Yeah, so we were quite lucky to have a big team of volunteers to target. So around 1,000 people volunteer regularly at Fareshare. So we started with them and also focused on our corporate supporters. So that included our corporate volunteers as well as corporate donors. But we found that it was really effective for acquisition as well. And we're able to engage with new supporters, so friends of friends or people who had recommended the Footsteps Challenge to others, or corporate teams who signed up as well.
Oh, great. Oh, that's good to hear. Also that you had an idea of who you were going to target, and then, expanded on that based on your experience. Jenny, you know a little bit about that as well, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. I was really hoping this year we could stop using the word pivot, but it's definitely been what this campaign has had to do. So initially, we went out this year really wanting to look at acquiring new donors, as well as giving this as an opportunity to our existing donors so they can do something extra for us. Then, this was really going to be our priority throughout the recruitment and the activation phase. But being the organisation that we are, we have to be agile and respond to emergencies. So when the escalating conflict in Ukraine happened, we knew that needed to take priority. So we had to change our plan for Water Walk quite drastically and really move it to a focus on acquisition and allowing the comms that are going to our existing donors to be about the escalating emergency. Interestingly, without a doubt, it's had an impact on our recruitment. But interestingly, looking at the Facebook audiences that we've been targeting, the most successful ones are actually that really broad targeting that we were doing which is perfect for acquisition. And our donors were actually less likely to convert on digital media. So it's been a really insightful way to learn about our audience and learn about how peer-to-peer marketing works for us online. But we've definitely found that that acquisition focus with some broad targeting has been the most successful with recruiting in digital space for it.
Interesting. I think I've got a few lessons learned from this already, that no campaign is the same, because it looks like Alice was actually really able to tap into their supporters network and getting them to sign up, but also realized there was an opportunity to expand. While for you guys, it turned out to be that the new audiences were probably more appealed, attracted to this proposition. So that is really fascinating, that it's not just plug and play and do what another person does. You really have to find your own way in that sense, I suppose. But it also highlights the importance of monitoring your campaign throughout, because if you start off with selecting a particular target audience that you want to reach, and then you realize that it's actually not performing that well, or not you don't get the results that you were expecting, that you do need to pivot and see how you respond to that to get your campaign goals. Yeah, fascinating. Thanks so much. So as you can see in that brainstorm phase, we talked through motivation, why you're going to do it, what's the trigger, how do you link it back to your cause, who is your audiences, and then you magically kind of wrap it all up, and then you come up with a concept. And you already both shared a little bit about that, so I don't think we have to elaborate too much around this. For Alice, for you, it was stepping in the footsteps of your chefs, kind of walking alongside your chefs and building a narrative around that, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So during COVID, our chefs were working hard to keep up with demand for meals, and could cover sort of 10 to 15 kilometers a day in the kitchen, walking as they're cooking meals. So that was the idea, that we would ask people to walk in our chefs' shoes. So our stretch target for our walkers was 150 kilometers over 15 days, to kind of echo that distance our chefs can cover.
Yeah, that's a really good link, and nice to kind of tell a story around. And Jenny, you also mentioned that your specific situation that you wanted to highlight in the campaign about children having to walk so many distance. There's obviously an instant link with your challenge as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, we've really used the tagline "Walk for Water so they don't have to." And I think being that kind of solution minded, that by doing this experience, you're creating a solution to make the people that you're supporting situation better. I think that's been a really nice thing, to focus on the solution rather than the problem that people are experiencing.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks so much for sharing. We are moving along to the next phase. So once you've kind of got that's the base mark of the baseline for your campaign, and now you can start building around that particular concept. So we move to the shape your campaign phase. As you can see here, there are a few places where you can add and summarize what you have brainstormed and what you ended up with. So what your campaign is about and why you're doing it. And then there are some other aspects that we will dive into in a second. I also want to quickly show what another organization has done about getting a really sharp and tangible concept for a campaign that links back to a cause of that particular organization, and that is half cut. So it turns out that half of the world's forests are gone, and their call to action is to cut, shave, color half of your hair. So there's a direct link between the challenge that is being put out and the message that they want to put out, is that half of the forest has been cut. So that's a really clever way to create a concept and that links back to the mission of the organization. I also wanted to show you this one to show that an call to action doesn't necessarily be a walking event. I mean, Alice and Jenny, by accident, both have a walking campaign, but obviously there's all kinds of challenges or reasons why you want to motivate your fundraisers. It doesn't even have to be a challenge, but just wanted to point that out to you as well as an example. So then we go on with setting campaign goals. In the planner is a link to, or in this framework is a link to the planner. Tom shared this in his webinar last week as well. So it looks like this. So you can put in all kinds of metrics in there, and then it helps you guiding setting your goals and what your return on investment is and how many fundraisers you need to recruit if you think they're going to raise that much money each, and all those kind of things. It's a really handy tool to come up with that, your goals for your campaign. But I'm really keen to hear, of course, from our guest speakers. So Alice, how did you go about setting your campaign goal?
Yeah, so we launched the Footsteps Challenge in 2020, and it was quite difficult to set that target. It was our first one. We were thrilled with the response we received to that campaign. So we used that one as a benchmark for the campaign we ran last year for our 2020 Footsteps Challenge. And then we identified ways that we could increase acquisition and income. So one of the areas we focused on was really working to engage our corporate supporters. We encourage them to create teams within the workplace that would help sort of spread the word about Fareshare and get more people on board. And to do that, we really launched early, contacting our corporate supporters, and we developed resources specifically for corporate supporters as well.
Excellent. Yeah. So you kind of got a little bit under the skin of your audiences as well, and started to see what they needed to make that happen as well. And that's how you ended up with those resources, I suppose. Excellent. And that really touches on another part of this step. That's the motivation of your supporters. So if you really kind of can dive a bit deeper and get under the skin of your supporters and know what really triggers them, then that can help you with coming up with a whole bunch of resources that might be helpful. That can also include rewards and badges and things like that may appeal to them as well. And for that, to illustrate it a bit better, I also want to share another example, which is Olivia's Walk for Wellness. So Olivia Newton-John Cancer Wellness and Research Center, they organized a challenge as well, and they had specific rewards. So as you can see here, you could win a skincare product, but the highest fundraisers, the top fundraisers, were invited for a virtual morning tea with Olivia Newton-John. And the reason why I point this one out is because apparently across the world, there are people who are absolutely massive fans of Olivia Newton-John. So the fact that they could potentially win a morning tea with Olivia Newton-John was such a trigger for them to sign up and really go hard in this challenge. So it is really interesting to see what is going to trigger your supporters and what is going to motivate them to go even harder for your cause. So this is a fun one that I just wanted to point out to see what that could look like. Right, back to Jenny and Alice. Did you both use any rewards or incentives or anything like that for your campaign? Jenny, maybe I can start with you.
Yeah, sure. So we did. So this year, to incentivize signups, which we wanted to get people signed up and get them activated nice and quickly. So we offered you could claim a t-shirt or a bucket hat to our first 300 people to sign up. And it was really interesting because some of those early signups actually didn't want or need the incentive. So we were able to continue offering it until we ran out of stock. So that was nice that we could make it stretch a little bit further. And then we're engaging once you've signed up, to try and get you to fundraise more. We've got a couple of prizes for people who raise over $500 or people who raise over $100 go into certain drawers. So I'm trying to have those, I suppose, 2 stages of incentives: sign up and then increase fundraising of those good fundraisers.
Okay, interesting that you mentioned they go in a drawer rather than just a gift for anybody who reaches that milestone. So what's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, in 2020 we did a reward for our top fundraiser, and then kind of the top 10 fundraisers, and I think then the top 30 fundraisers, and they got a certain reward. The issue that we found, and it kind of touched on what you said before, Helga, of those top fundraisers will fundraise regardless. So I think sometimes when you're like, great, these top 10 people who are doing amazing are going to get rewarded for doing amazing, it's not necessarily going to get them to do more, whereas making it a draw makes it kind of more of a level playing field. All of a sudden you've got 100 people who are going to be pushing to get to that level to enter the draw. So we just found it offering kind of a wider incentive was better, and still obviously stewardship and engaging those top fundraisers, but they didn't necessarily need that exchange of getting a t-shirt or a drink bottle or something like that, whereas those lower fundraisers seem to respond to that in a much more better way.
Very good. Was that the same for you, Alice?
Actually, we found it was quite similar. In our first year, we provided hampers to our top fundraisers, more as a thank you for fundraising, but we found that it wasn't really an incentive for them. They were going to fundraise anyway, so we didn't offer that in last year in 2021, but we did provide a lot of stewardship, similar to Jenny as well, to all fundraisers to ensure they had the resources they needed.
Excellent. Yeah. And I think that links back to the concepts that we shared earlier. Your top fundraisers will go out and raise most of the funds of your campaign. And therefore, you shouldn't forget about them and actually make sure you look after them. However, there's a real opportunity to look at the others as well to see how you can lift them up. And that's what it looks like you both took that approach. That's really good to hear. Yeah, and then were there any other resources? I mean, you touched on it as well a little bit. You had some digital resources for your corporates, Alice. What else did you guys develop?
So we developed sort of suggested wording that participants could use if they were sharing their Raise Lee profile on social media or through email. And we prepared social media images or tiles as well that people could share to show that they were part of the Footsteps Challenge and encourage people to get behind them, as well as a workplace poster for our corporate supporters.
Great. Anything else to add, Jenny, what you guys did?
No, I think really the same. I think, like Alice has touched on, I think just giving them everything that they need to make it as easy as possible for them to do a social media post, to send an email. So, you know, the written content and the social media tiles is kind of where we've landed, and it seems to have been the most helpful. But yeah, I think it's an area that, you know, you can continue to grow and explore in, but I think giving those kind of easy wins is a really good first step.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think you both kind of maybe unknowingly responded to what we found as well, that sharing your page is actually an indicator that people go on and with activating and raising a lot of money. So making that step really easy is gold. And you both seem to be doing that. So that's pretty awesome. So the third step in the whole thing is promotion, because it's all very well having a fantastic campaign idea and having all the resources in the world to help them. But if you don't recruit them in the first place, then you have a little bit of a problem. So it is the most important thing, in my opinion, as an organization running a peer-to-peer, is recruiting your fundraisers, because they go on with fundraising for you. So the sign up button, the sign up, you know, call to action, and getting them to the page and actually signing up is the critical component that you obviously can do. So promotion, therefore. There are a few phases, of course. You have what you can do pre-campaign, then you may launch the campaign. You have during the campaign and potentially some post-campaign activities as well. So this part of the planning is all about what does it look like? What are you going to develop? What messages are you going to use? What channels are you using? And all those things combined. So Alice, can you share what strategies you used to create some momentum for your campaign?
Yeah, so we mainly focused on targeted emails to different groups of supporters, letting them know about the Footsteps Challenge and asking them to take part. We promoted it on social media as well, and we included it as a main call to action on our website and email signatures, sort of just anywhere we could prompt reminders for people to sign up and get involved in the Footsteps Challenge.
Yeah, and you shared earlier as well that you were really trying to get to the corporates and then, getting within the corpus the word out as well. So you used that strategy as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Great. And what about you, Jenny? You did say that obviously with the situation in Ukraine and UNICEF running an appeal for that, you had all these plans probably lined up, and then basically you could throw them out. Maybe what happened?
Yeah, we had a beautiful plan, and really similar to kind of the framework that you're going through, Helga, of breaking down week by week pre-campaign. What are we going to do at launch? Adding those KPIs that we want at those different steps. And it was going to be our key focus, which, corporates, ambassadors, media team was all going to get really behind it. But you can't predict emergencies. So we really had to pivot and deprioritize Water Walk, which is a really challenging thing when you've spent such a long time and you've built a fantastic plan. But I think it's really making sure that you're agile and putting your resources and energy into the most viable thing. So it meant pulling back our EDMs, which especially, we're 1 week out from the campaign, and now would have kind of been that really crucial time to engage our supporters that we've really had to pull back on. So without a doubt has impacted, and as well as some of our ambassadors choosing to support Ukraine. But in saying that, through peer-to-peer fundraising for Ukraine within 2.5 weeks, we've raised over $600,000. So it's definitely looking at where should your energy be spent, and sometimes needing to put things down and pick things up and not sticking to the plan just because you have the plan. So it's been a huge learning curve for us, but we're still really thrilled. We've got over 700 people signed up, and we're really looking forward to a strong Water Walk campaign. But definitely a few factors that we've had to go without, with things needing to move to the other campaign to support.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. And that's just reality that you have to deal with. But also we touched on that earlier, to just constantly keep an eye on how your campaign is tracking against your original plan, and see if you need to tweak that, because we saw that velocity. I can't pronounce that word. I should have chosen a different one. Where you are kind of projecting how many signups and so on you want to see in the lead up of your campaign, and where you think they will come from. But if that's not eventuating, what is your plan B around that as well? So it's those kind of things you need to monitor. It's not just kind of set and forget, is it? And running a campaign like that.
Completely. And I suppose to add to that point, the campaigns can coexist though. You with your marketing strategy, you look at who you can target so you're not saturating the same audiences. But it by no means have we been Water Walk can't go ahead. It's still going to be a wonderful campaign, and we have hundreds of people participate. So I think at an organization perspective, it's really important to highlight that they can definitely coexist, and you can still run it even if it isn't the number one priority at the time.
Yeah. So that is mostly we were talking about pre and during, or pre and at launch of the campaign. Alice, were there any particular actions you took during and after the campaign as well for your promotion and marketing?
Yeah, we really sort of just continued with what we were doing. We continued promoting the Footsteps Challenge through social media, and contacting participants through emails, targeted emails, and through phone calls as well when it was appropriate. So for our corporate groups, if they hadn't activated, if they hadn't started fundraising, then we'd give them a call and say, how can we support you with this? So we found that was quite helpful for getting people activated, but I think there's a group of people who will sign up and they just won't be as engaged as others. So we did what we could to support them to activate. We also provided some tailored thank yous to participants after the challenge as well.
Nice, very good. Yeah, and that actually leads into our last phase of the framework, which is the supporter journeys. You already touched on that a little bit, Alice, but your fundraisers will go out of the way to fundraise for you. I've mentioned it a few times. You've recruited them now through excellent marketing and making sure that you are there where your fundraisers are, and you have optimized the sign-up flow on your campaign, maybe chucked in some A/B testing to make sure that the sign-up button is labeled so it has the highest conversion. All of those things you've done. Now, of course, is your job to mobilize them and motivate them to reach their goal. Alice, you just mentioned the personal touch. There is nothing more effective than just picking up the phone and talking to them, isn't it? So that's really great. But Raisely platform comes with a whole set of automated messages with each campaign that you can maximize. So make sure that you edit those and not just stick with the default messaging, but really help getting them to actually activate, get the first donation and so on. But beyond that, you can also do more. And we talk often about onboarding and milestone journey. So the onboarding journey is all about activation. How do you make sure that they actually go on and raise money? Not that they think, oh, I've now signed up, I've done my thing, I am participating, but actually getting them to raise money for you, start raising money. And once they do that, how do you make sure that they keep going and not only reach their goal, but exceeding their goal? And we talked about the incentives already as well, but this is more about the communication and getting that message out to them. So there's all these different things. You can set it up in Raisely, but you can also, of course, use your external marketing tool that you may already employ in your organization as well. So that's all possible. So let's dive into some of the strategies that Alice and Jenny have deployed. Jenny, what about you? What did you use to activate your fundraiser? I mean, you mentioned a few things already, but can you expand a bit more?
Yeah, so we had our incentives, but I'd also touch on with the journey. It's just not one onboarding journey. You know, do one for people who are, for us, obviously being a walking challenge, people who are logging Ks really early, like give them a special boost, and then give people who are not fundraising, you know, an inactive fundraiser journey, and take that time to make sure it's really tailored. I think trying to do a one size fits all, there's nothing worse when you get an email that doesn't really fit with you. So making sure that you're tailoring those journeys to people who will be going on different, it's just started raining quite heavy, people who will be going on different journeys within the campaign. And this year we've really not overdone, but implemented an SMS. So people get a really nice welcome SMS touch point, you know, just those a couple times throughout the campaign to reward them, let them know that they're amazing. You know, picking up the phone is great, but we know so many millennials don't answer the phone anymore. So it's just a really nice way to engage with them rather than getting lost in the inbox, on top of the incentives that I spoke about a little bit earlier.
Yeah, oh, that's a great tip. Thanks for sharing. Alice, what about you?
So something that we found most effective was introducing the sign-up donation feature. When we first ran the Footsteps Challenge, we just gently asked people to donate towards themselves. The second time we ran it, we included it as one of the sign-up options. Please donate to yourself, and we just asked people to donate a small amount. And we found that the self-donation rate jumped from 57% to 82%. People could skip the option if they wanted, and we didn't ask for much, but we found that it did help with that initial engagement.
Excellent. And that's a really good tactic that you use, and also to ask not for a big amount, because there has been, you know, traditionally a lot of people were thinking that the first amount that is being donated to a campaign is really important because you're anchoring. It turned out that that's actually not that relevant. The fact that a self-donation is there is more important than the amount that is actually being donated. So making it really easy for people to do a self-donation by kind of maybe asking for a little contribution is a really good tactic. And it's great to see that so many people did that. Did you also see that influenced how they went on afterwards with fundraising as well?
Yeah, it seemed as though they were more engaged overall once they'd made that initial donation, and they were more likely to promote it to their Footsteps Challenge to their contacts as well.
Yeah. And Jenny just mentioned that it's not about just one email journey for all of them. You really have to tailor. So Alice, did you do that as well?
Yeah, we found exactly the same thing. It's really important to tailor those communications. So even in the starting from the promotion of the campaign, we split our potential participants into different groups and really tailored those communications for those participants. Then once participants had signed up, we again split them into groups so that we could tailor communication to them. As Jenny said, it doesn't really make sense if you get an email that doesn't fit with who you are or why you're doing, why you're committed to a campaign. So we really wanted to drill down into that and connect with the people who signed up to the Footsteps Challenge with those tailored communications.
Great. And you also did something else to maybe tap into why, you know, the people that participating, because it was a walking event and you thought there was an opportunity with 4 steps. Tell us a little bit more about that.
We did. So last year we added sort of a fun element called the 4 Steps Challenge. So when participants signed up, they could just tick a box to say if they were walking with their dog, and if they did, it added them to a separate leaderboard. And we created a new landing page on Raisley as part of the campaign called the 4 Steps Challenge, and created a leaderboard of these dogs who were participating in Footsteps. And at the end of the event, the person who raised the most received a doggy prize pack from Chobani, who provided that to us. But it just created a fun element to keep people engaged, and some cute social media posts as well.
Yeah, excellent. That's a really cool idea. Thanks so much. Well, I think we touched on basically all the aspects of the framework. As you can see, I didn't really talk through each of the steps. I just wanted to make sure that by giving the examples, you get an idea of, bring the framework to life. And hopefully the participants will now download it and start brainstorming with their teams to create an amazing campaign strategy. Before we finish off and jump to the Q&A, is there any final thing that you want to share with the audience about what made your campaign successful that you haven't shared?
I'll jump in first, Alice. I would say just celebrate your participants and your fundraisers. You know, so many people put stories on Instagram and tag you, you know, making sure that you're connecting with them and where possible, sharing them. I think that connection really does go a long way, and also other people will see that messaging and it might inspire them to activate or sign up. So definitely celebrating and connecting with your supporters would be my number 1 tip.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. Alice?
Yeah, we found that making the ask really simple was effective. So walk over 15 days to raise money for Fareshare. UNICEF as well, it's really simple ask for water walk. Once people signed up, we actually could drill down into that a bit more, so people could choose if they wanted to cycle or swim instead. But our main focus was walking and just making that ask really simple.
Yeah, thanks so much for all that insight. Let's now stop sharing and see if I can bring up the Q&A. I'm really keen to see if I can get you to answer a few questions as well, obviously. They were probably just directed to you anyway. There are already a few in there, and maybe some more will come up as well. So there is a question from someone. Can you please go into more detail about acquisition, i.e. are you Facebook ads or forms with follow-up phone calls? Not quite sure if I get that question, but
I'm happy to touch on that. Yeah, so we're doing Facebook forms where people pop in their details and it comes into our CRM, and we're popping them on a journey, which includes SMS and a phone call to try and get them signed up. That's definitely not the main focus of our Facebook ads. We're really using our general direct to sign up ads, but targeting people who don't necessarily support us. So acquiring them through Waterwalk and then hopefully making them become lifelong UNICEF supporters. So we're doing a combination of the Facebook form as well as direct to sign up ads.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I just misread the question. Sorry about that. And thank you for answering that one, Jenny. Another question from Justin. Do you display the dollar target? And if so, why? And if not, why not? What about you, Alice? Maybe do you want to start with that?
Yeah, we didn't for this campaign. We because the ask was really focusing on supporting our chefs, our dollar handle would be, this amount of money funds this many meals, but we really wanted to keep it on walking in our chefs' shoes. So it didn't quite fit in with our focus of the campaign.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That you just still go back to the content and your key messages of your campaign, and sometimes it may actually be really useful, because if you say support so many meals, you want to know how many meals you want to do, and then the target becomes important. But in this case, it was more about supporting the chefs. Yeah. What about you, Jenny? Did you do that as well, or?
Yeah, similar. I think if you've got a tangible outcome of why you're wanting to achieve a certain amount, then it's absolutely worthwhile to include. We didn't, we just want to raise as much as possible. In saying that, when we have spoken to our past participants, trying to get them to re-sign up, we've let them know what we're wanting to achieve, and, talking about going above and beyond and really trying to inspire them to come back onto the challenge. So I think there's time and place for sharing that message, but because we don't have a tangible outcome for how much money we want to raise, we just want to have as big an impact as possible. We haven't popped it on the landing page.
Yeah. Thank you. A similar question. Is it a good idea to announce your campaign target, and why not? Well, you mentioned that, both of you actually, that sometimes for your campaign it's actually really critical to do that, because that's the goal of the campaign, and then other times it isn't. Some of my participants can be aggressive with giving feedback about our Racely peer-to-peer sites. What is a good general response I can give them about this? I don't want to bother Racely every time an individual gives me a piece of their mind about the site, which may be only applicable to them. Thank you. Oh, that's interesting. We'd love to hear that feedback, what that is. But maybe, because it's not shared what that feedback is, have you come in situations where you get some critical response from your supporters? And what's your approach? What's your tactic?
Happy to go. I think there's two parts to this question. I think one is this squeaky wheel. Often it's not sometimes a huge problem, but it's definitely worth looking into, because if someone's gone to the trouble of reaching out to you, there's probably a lot more people that are experiencing this but haven't reached out to you. So I would always, take it seriously and look into it and see if it's worth addressing. Sometimes it's, you've chosen to do something a certain way because there's more benefits than cons. But yeah, I would just always try and address it and see if there's a solution. And I would say there's been a few times where I'm like, well, I can't do anything about that, and then I've reached out to the team at Racely and they've been able to find a solution that kind of does the best of both worlds. So I definitely utilize the support team there as well.
Thanks. I was going to mention it as well, but you really beat me to it. So that's great. Yeah, I think it's important. They are your supporters, and that engagement with them, not only when things go well, but also when there are some niggles, is really important. At least acknowledge that, and then see how you can do that. But yeah, we do have an excellent support team. My colleagues are always helpful and ready to help you with questions anyway. So don't hesitate to contact us with any niggles. I'd love to hear some figures on what numbers the girls, I assume Jenny and Alice, got for people participating in their first peer-to-peer campaign. How did you set your first goals? And I know it's tricky because it's a trial and you don't really know where to start. When you have done it before, you can at least build on that experience. But the first one, how did you do that, Alice?
Yeah, so it was tricky. We have been involved in a peer-to-peer fundraiser before that we hadn't organised ourselves. So we sort of used up the number of participants from that campaign, but we also wanted to build on that. So we also looked at our supporters as well and who we could go out to. So we knew we had a big group of volunteers we could start with. So it was really looking at all those figures and all that information, then pulling a number out. We were quite fortunate to engage more people than we hoped to in our first campaign. 600 people signed up the first time we ran it.
Yeah, that is good to share how the different sources of information you use for that. And also, I just want to add to that planner that I just kind of quickly shared in a split second. That will also help you with setting that goal, because acquisition is costing you money, right? So it is that balance between what is the goal, what do you think the activation and their fundraising capacity is, how many people do you recruit, and how much is that going to cost, and all these different levers are important, and then you can find your sweet spot, and that planner will really help you with that as well. I am really mindful that we reached the end of the time that we have available. I am very mindful that people need to move on and do other things. I'm more than happy to stay on with Alice and Jenny for a bit longer to answer the last questions. And maybe you can watch them in the recording later if you need to drop off. Is that a plan for everyone? I hope so. So we'll just go through the last questions and then we wrap it up as well. Do you have recommended timeframes and process to follow when it comes to recruiting fundraisers and running campaigns? How many months should we put into the planning, recruiting people, launching, campaign period itself, evaluation, acknowledgement? Good question. Obviously, that velocity graph is quite helpful for you to understand what the kind of duration is, but you already saw from Jenny that the actual event timeline is quite short, so it doesn't always have to be a month or anything. I would say it takes a little while to plan, but let me hear from the people with experience. Jenny, maybe you can answer this one.
Yeah, I'd say recruiting, you want to give a month, even 6 weeks, to kind of create a bit of awareness before you start with the ask. Planning is really a tough one. It depends how, I suppose, connected, how integrated you want it to be. You know, lots of people at the moment are doing challenges that don't have that connection to cause, and they're getting amazing results, and they would be a lot quicker to plan. I think once you need that correlation and you need to know impact and case studies, it does take time. I would say the water walk, took quite a few months to develop. That's not 9 to 5 every single day developing, but it does take time to put it all together. But I would say if you gave yourself, at minimum kind of 6 weeks to develop, 6 weeks to recruit, and then launch, then that would be usually fine. But I think it really does depend on the kind of campaign that you're wanting to do.
Yeah.
Alice, you might have more on that.
Sorry, I completely agree. And I was just going to add, we did find that the majority of people signed up 1 to 2 weeks before we launched the campaign. So if you're starting recruitment 6 weeks out, which is pretty much what we did as well, then don't be disheartened if uptake's slow at that time, because people do wait really until the last minute to sign up.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I also want to make sure that you in your planning, you realize that you also want to have some really good assets, some photos, all the copy for your journeys, the copy for your website, all that sort of thing needs to be worked out as well. So that takes time as well. So that the planning, there's quite a bit in that phase, right? That you need to do. So I wouldn't underestimate that aspect. Next question, what marketing activity do you use to reactivate your previous fundraisers? We find we receive a low percentage of previous fundraisers each year, so not really able to get them engaging over and over again. Alice, is that the same for you? You've run it now a couple of times. I just rewind back after the first time we ran Footsteps. We did make sure that we thanked everyone. We gave them that sort of positive ending to the Footsteps challenge, and then we targeted them again when launching the second one. So we said, thank you so much for walking last year. We're running the event again this year, and hope for your support.
obviously not all of those people signed up again, but I think thanking them afterwards and then really targeting the communication to them helped activate quite a few of them.
Yeah. I think it's also important to realize that who you're engaging for your campaign. If you have a strong supporter base that supports you in any way, anytime, all the time, it's more likely that they will come back. If you're reaching out to new audiences, they may be really enticed by your proposition, but maybe the day after they want to do something else. I mean, there are so many good causes to help. So I think it's also, there's not just one way, and not the if you don't do it wrong, if you can't reactivate previous fundraisers, it may just be the people you're targeting are more wanting to hop around a little bit as well. So obviously you put in your practices to see if you can hook them in again. But yeah, depends on who your initial target audience is, I would say. Can I ask how you manage the supporter journey, particularly with the welcome texts? Jenny, that's one for you.
So we do it all through Raisely. We just find it really great, the easy setup of triggers and things. And in the Raisely, you can do SMS, and they've got a really nice kind of blog. I don't know, Helga, if that's the right word for it, but kind of a how to do it and set it up. So it's honestly really easy. Yeah, and we've seen a really nice engagement with it of people. Then you can kind of see when they've got the text because they begin to activate. So yeah, can't recommend it enough.
That's really good to hear. I do see that there's quite a few questions still there to answer. So perhaps we should just note these questions and get an answer to them and to the participants and see how we can share that learning further with the other audience as well. I just want to make sure that we're not, dragging this on. There's so much to share, so much to learn from this, and we could go on. We did say that in the prep. We could talk for hours about this. So I really want to see if we can wrap it up. I want to really thank you, Alice and Jenny, for everything you shared, all the time you put into it to create this webinar. Really appreciate. I love working with you, and yeah, we're really excited to see how Waterwalks will perform in the next couple of weeks, a few weeks, and Alice also to look forward to seeing your campaign in market soon again as well. So thank you so much, and thank you all the participants for being here. I hope we were able to copy all the questions that have been unanswered, and I promise that we will get back with answers in some shape or form. I just don't know how that looks like, but I'm sure we will get something that we can manage. Okay, I hope to see you all, either me as a participant, but in a next webinar or maybe in a conversation. Great to have you all here, and have a great day.
Thank you, Helga.
Yeah, thanks so much, Helga. Thanks, Alice. That was really great.
Thanks, Jenny.